Testing 1, 2, test, test.
Test 1, 2, 3, mic test. Huh. Oh, it's okay. Uh-huh. Oh. Mic test, sound check, 1, 2, 3, 4. I wonder if it's your connect. Do you think it's your connection in your machine? Hmm. 1, 2, 3, 4, mic test. Are you getting sound though on the machine? I mean, like you're jumping, so it's recording? Oh. Mic test, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sound check. Yes sound, no sound. Mm. Oh. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, sound check, mic check. Yeah. 1, 2, mic test. Oh, and that was fine. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, mic set. Put the other one in my machine. We'll see if it.
I got it.
Oh, okay.
Testing 1, 2, test 1, 2, 3. Reporter mic check. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2. Test. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Testing.
Mic test, sound check, 1, 2, 3. Not again. Again, nothing? It's gotta be. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, mic test, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. That. Mic test, 1, 2, okay.
Go home, Jamie. Committee will come to order pursuant to notice. We meet today to mark up 4 bipartisan measures, and without objection, all members may have 5 days to submit statements or extraneous materials on today's business. As members were notified yesterday, we intend to bring these all up en bloc, and so without objection, the following items previously provided to members are also in your packets. They're going to be considered en bloc and are considered as read. There's 4 measures here: H.R. 1997, the Ukraine Cybersecurity Cooperation Act, Royce Amendment 85 in the nature of a substitute, SBA Amendment 68 to Royce Amendment 85, H.R. 2219, the End Banking for Human Traffickers Act of 2017 with Royce Amendment 2. H.R. 2646, the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Extension Act, Royce Amendment 84 in the nature of a substitute, and H.R. 3851, the War Crimes Rewards Expansion Act, and I'll now recognize myself to speak on today's business. So we consider 2219. This is the End Banking for Human Traffickers Act. It's going to help law enforcement and financial institutions report and identify suspected human traffickers so that they can be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. As you know, trafficking has devastated tens of millions of lives around the world. It's impacted here in the United States many lives as well. The perpetrators of these disgusting acts prey on the defenseless, on our society, especially young underage girls. And tragically, it's estimated that forced labor yields more than $150 billion in illegal profits every year if we include all forms of trafficking. This makes trafficking the 3rd most valuable criminal enterprise in the world. If we're going to end this horrific trade, we've got to start by cutting traffickers off from their financial system. These criminals are laundering profits through financial institutions far too easily. This will put a stop to that. Next, we consider 3646. This is the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Extension Act, and I want to thank our Chairman Emeritus, Eliana Ross-Leitonen, thank you for your work on this bill. It's going to extend NATO Plus treatment for Jordan another 3 years and encourage greater security and economic cooperation between our 2 nations. Jordan, as you know, is a key partner in the fight against ISIS. It's a critical pillar of stability in a volatile region. And 2 weeks ago, the committee sat down with King Abdullah to discuss how we can continue to work together to defeat extremism, deny terrorist groups safe haven, and increase economic opportunity and political stability in Jordan. Next, I want to thank Representatives Boyle and Fitzpatrick. They introduced H.R. 1997, the Ukraine Cybersecurity Cooperation Act, and this bill encourages the Secretary of State to strengthen cybersecurity cooperation with Ukraine. Ukraine is on the front lines of digital combat, as we know. Many global cybersecurity analysts believe Moscow is using Ukraine as a cyber war testing ground. By working with Kyiv, we can harden our defenses against the same kind of aggression. And finally, I want to thank Representative Virginia Fox and Ranking Member Engel for their leadership on 3851. This is the War Crimes Rewards Expansion Act. The Department of State Rewards Program has been critical to preventing international terrorism, narcotics trafficking, and other criminal activity. This bill clarifies that the existing authority to offer rewards leading to the arrest or conviction of foreign nationals can be used in connection with domestic prosecution of foreign war criminals in U.S. courts. And I will now recognize Mr. Engel for his remarks.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for calling today's markup. We were here in this room last night with our party, and I know all the members that attended it had a good time. There are elves all over the desks right now. Members can look at themselves and see how they look as elves, so no one can ever say we don't do serious things on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I want to thank you for calling today's markup. This is a great example of what you and I have both tried to do, along with members of this committee, work in a bipartisan way to pass legislation that supports America's interests around the world and enhances our national security. So I thank you again for being a good partner in that effort and for helping us close out the year on a positive note. We've got 4 good bipartisan measures before us today, and I want to thank all our members for their hard work. I support all these measures, and in the interest of time, would like to enter my full remarks into the record. I just want to point out the last bill with Virginia Fox. I have worked with her on the bill, and I'm very pleased to work with her passing this piece of legislation. As always, I thank all of our members for their efforts on these pieces of legislation, and the chairman for his leadership, and I yield back.
Thank you. We go to Eliana Ross-Leitonen first here.
Thank you so much, Chairman Royce and Ranking Member Engel, for bringing these important bipartisan measures before us today. This dynamic duo continues to set the standard for bipartisan cooperation in the Congress. And thanks to both of you for working with me on H.R. 2646, the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Extension Act, a bill that I'm proud to have authored alongside my co-chair, Ted Deutsch, as well as our colleagues Hal Rogers, Nita Lowy, and Adam Schiff. I also want to recognize and give a warm welcome to the Jordanian ambassador to the United States, who is here with us today in the audience. Madam Ambassador, as always, it's great to see you, and I look forward to our continued work together. As one of our closest allies in the Middle East, Jordan is on the front lines against ISIS and other multiple crises in the region. They impact our national security interests. And my bill extends the authorities that I authored and our committee passed in 2015, providing continued eligibility for enhanced U.S. defense cooperation with Jordan, including a higher dollar threshold for notification of military sales and an expedited congressional review process. This bill supports the negotiation of a new enhanced memorandum of understanding. It authorizes the establishment of an enterprise fund, allowing the best and brightest from the U.S. investment and business community to work with their Jordanian counterparts and jumpstart the kingdom's private sector, as well as help our economy. And lastly, Jordan's military and economic success are critical for U.S. priorities in the Middle East, and I urge all of my colleagues to support this important bill. Thanks for your help on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Eliana. We go to Bill Keating of Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm proud to join you in sponsoring H.R. 2219, End Banking of Human Trafficking Act, scheduled to advance today. This bill is a common-sense piece of bipartisan legislation to tackle financing and human trafficking. The International Labor Organization estimated in 2012 that there were nearly 21 million victims of human trafficking worldwide. 21 million. Criminals engaged in this horrific business of human trafficking must be stopped and held accountable so that the number does not continue to rise. Being successful in eliminating these despicable criminal networks requires a strategic approach. As I learned as a district attorney when confronted by complex security and law enforcement problems, the best approach is to follow the money. Human trafficking is one of the most lucrative, one of the top 3, criminal enterprises in the world. And these criminals are taking advantage of our banking and financial institutions for their own gain at the expense of so many innocent lives. We can do better, and this piece of legislation is one step towards eliminating the modern slavery of our time. This bill strengthens interagency cooperation and requires action to review and improve current anti-money laundering programs so they better target human trafficking. The information is out there. We just need the right tools in the right hands so that perpetrators are no longer able to profit from these heinous crimes and can be brought to justice. I thank the Chairman for joining together with me in bringing this legislation forward and urge my colleagues' support today. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Keating. We go to Congressman Dana Rohrabacher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I join with my other colleagues in thanking you and Ranking Member Engel for providing the leadership we need for a bipartisan committee and efforts which are exemplified by the 4 bills that you are presenting us today. Let me say I'm very pleased that when you talk about ending the banking for human trafficking, I think that we need to focus more on the banking and the financial elements to those things which we are upset with around the world, and this is a very good thing to start with. But what we have is especially in the third world, you have just wealth being sucked out of those countries, and the poorest people of the world are suffering because of corruption in their country by their leaders, and they put the money in banks, in Western banks. We need to pay attention to that. That's a crime against humanity as well, just as this human trafficking, especially with young girls. This is a way we can combat these evils in the world today. Second of all, Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank you and Ranking Member Engel for focusing on King Abdullah in Jordan. We've met with him a number of times. King Abdullah and Jordan itself are pivotal to the well-being and security of the United States of America. And I would only hope that we can be as positive and as cooperative with President el-Sisi of Egypt. I believe these two leaders in the Middle East, if America is to live at peace in the future, those two national leaders have to succeed. And so I join you today in all of your, I will vote yes on your in-block amendments, and thank you very much for providing such very necessary legislation.
Thank you, Dan. Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania.
I thank the chair and the ranking member for calling up my bipartisan bill, H.R. 1997, the Ukraine Cybersecurity Cooperation Act, for consideration at today's markup. I introduced this bill with my colleague from the other side of the aisle, Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, also from Pennsylvania, which encourages cooperation between the United States and our ally Ukraine on matters of cybersecurity and requires a report from the U.S. State Department on the best practices to protect against future cyber attacks to the benefit of both nations. I believe cybersecurity is the national security challenge of our time. Cyber warfare is cheap to carry out and easy for adversaries to hide behind, making it particularly damaging, difficult to detect, and impossible for the victim to quickly respond. In Ukraine, it's no coincidence that cyber attacks against Ukraine increased when the Ukrainian people self-organized to demand an open and democratic society in 2014. Days before Ukraine's 2014 presidential election, hackers infiltrated the Central Election Commission with a series of attacks that disabled the website in an attempt to sow distrust in the outcome of the election of President Poroshenko. In 2015, hackers remotely shut down power at 3 regional electricity distribution companies, creating a power outage affecting over 200,000 customers for approximately 1 to 6. Last year, specialists discovered a malware-infected computer at an airport in Ukraine, evidence of a suspected cyber attack. Attempted cyber attacks have only continued and since, in fact, have escalated. Both the United States and Ukraine have clear interests in strengthening our cyber defenses. Moreover, our cooperation toward this goal will send a strong, important signal of Western support for Ukraine at a time when it is literally fighting to protect its democracy and its independence. We must stand strong with the people of Ukraine and our NATO allies and come together in furtherance of our cybersecurity defenses. This bill is a reasonable first step to do just that. So again, I thank the chair and the ranking member for their support of this bill. I also want to take a moment and thank my top staffer on these matters, Carly Frame, who has done such a wonderful job and has worked so hard on this bill. And I urge all of my colleagues to support it and yield back.
Brendan, thank you. We go to Steve Shabbat of Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we appreciate you convening this markup today, and I support all 4 bills and would like to speak out very favorably on your bill, H.R. 2219, the End Banking for Human Traffickers Act of 2017. This bill helps address a critical issue, protecting women and girls who face challenges literally at birth, when millions of children around the globe, mostly girls, are not properly registered, making it easier for those children to disappear into human trafficking, which is what your bill's about, or to be coerced into childhood marriage or forced labor and a whole range of other things. That's why I had introduced legislation in the House and Marco Rubio in the Senate to encourage birth certificates and national registries for children in developing countries. We passed that legislation, the Girls Count Act, out of this committee, and it was signed into law a while back by President Obama. And just this fall, the House passed another bill offered by our Democratic colleague from Illinois, Robin Kelly, and myself, the Protecting Girls' Access to Education Act, which called on the Secretary of State and the administrator of USAID to prioritize access to primary and secondary education in conflict zones to ensure that millions of child refugees will have a better chance at escaping violence, extremism, and again, human trafficking, which is an issue that we talk about a lot, but the world still struggles with. Unfortunately, the number of displaced people around the world continues to grow due to ongoing armed conflicts in places like Syria and South Sudan and more recently Burma. Human trafficking thrives in conflict zones, and we always must be cognizant of that. It's our responsibility as leaders of the free world to step up and ensure that human traffickers face every possible hurdle as they seek to coerce women and children into literally slavery in these modern times. So I commend Chairman Royce for leading this effort. I urge my colleagues to support all four of the measures, and I yield back.
Thanks, Steve. Brad Schneider of Illinois. Are you seeking time, Brad?
I'm not, but thank you.
Okay, we will go to Tom Swazi. Are you seeking term?
He's not here.
Andriano? Oh, David Cicilline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to you and to Ranking Member Engel for holding this markup today. I'm pleased that the committee is taking up these important bills to combat human trafficking, provide increased cyber assistance to Ukraine, improve our efforts to fight terrorism and transnational crime, and continue and strengthen our cooperation with Jordan on combating terrorism and assisting those affected by conflict in the Middle East. I'm particularly pleased to support H.R. 2646, the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Extension Act, which would allow for the creation of an enterprise fund for Jordan to attract private investment and help entrepreneurs and small businesses create jobs and to achieve sustainable economic development. Jordan is a critical ally in the fight against global terrorism, and we, the United States, should be an effective partner in helping them to address the challenges they face on their borders as a result of the ongoing civil war. Any assistance to Jordan must account for the incredible burden they have taken on in addressing the refugee crisis stemming from the Syrian civil war. Jordan hosts approximately 1.3 million refugees, and Syrians make up more than 10% of the total Jordanian population. Jordan's willingness to assist and accommodate refugees from this horrific war is to be applauded, especially in contrast to the United States' unwillingness to open its borders to refugees. But in this context, I want to bring up the issue of their Rayburn refugee camp at the Jordanian-Syrian border, where 50,000 people are stranded, mostly women and children, without food, water, or medical assistance. International NGOs and the United Nations have called for the immediate and unhindered resumption of humanitarian assistance to these vulnerable Syrians. I know we raised this issue with the King when he was here a few weeks ago, and I hope our two countries can work together to ensure all refugees have access to basic necessities. And again, I want to thank you, Chairman Royce and Ranking Member Engel, for holding this markup today, and yield back the balance of my time.
Thanks, David. We go to Judge Ted Poe of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and the Ranking Member for bringing these pieces of legislation before us today. I support all the bills. I'm going to speak on as many as I can. Your bill, the End Banking for Human Traffickers, is a vital piece of legislation. Takes aim at what clearly is, as we know, modern-day slavery. Even though Congress and other nations are starting to recognize human trafficking and passing legislation to combat it, it continues to grow, and it is a scourge of the world. And it is, as my friend Mr. Keating has mentioned, brings in a lot of money. The reason it's so profitable is because, unlike drugs, drugs are sold one time. Little girls are sold multiple times a day. And also the apprehension for drug offenders is higher than the apprehension for these traffickers. And it's also the fact that the chance of being captured is smaller and punishment is smaller. So those are reasons why this continues to be the #2 moneymaker for criminal enterprises in the world. And this is something that the world needs to deal with. I appreciate your legislation on this. Also support the other 3 bills. Our partnership with Jordan is very vital in the Middle East. I want to recognize Ambassador Kawar, who is here today. I appreciate her efforts in a situation that we had regarding an American soldier that was murdered in Jordan, and how Jordanian government worked on that, and I appreciate her and the relationship we have with in Jordan, and I hope that we can continue to be supportive of each other on the war on terror. And the Ukrainian Cybersecurity Act, Mr. Boyle's bill, is an excellent piece of legislation. My opinion is the United States is not doing enough to support Ukraine and their fight against the Napoleon of Siberia, as I call him, Putin, trying to take over their nation. And this will help Ukraine, but it'll also help the United States, and hopefully continue to try to thwart the Russian aggression that is taking place in many places of the world. Also support Mrs. Fox's bill, and I commend the chairman and the ranking member for bringing this legislation. All 4 pieces of legislation are excellent, and I will yield back my time.
Thank you, Judge. We go to Adriano Espaillat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Royce and Ranking Member Engels, thank you so much. It's always nice to see a bipartisan effort that comes out, of this committee consistently. Thank you both for your leadership in ensuring that this happens every time we're here. I am proud to lend my support to the 4 bills before us today. I would particularly like to commend Chairman Royce on his bill, H.R. 2219, the End Banking for Human Trafficking Act. This will hopefully get us one step closer to curbing money laundering related to human trafficking. Human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery, and using the tools at our disposals to eliminate this cruel practice is a step in the right direction. Lastly, I'm glad to support Congressman Brendan Boyle's bill, H.R. 1997, the Ukraine Cybersecurity Cooperation Act. Ukraine has been a susceptible country to cyber attacks from Russia, and I was glad that my amendment was included in this particular initiative. This would help improve Ukraine's ability to respond to Russian-supported disinformation and propaganda efforts in cyberspace, including through social media and other outlets. As we saw in Maine, the Ukrainian government blocked Russia's homegrown social media platforms, citing pro-Russian propaganda and offensive cyber operations as threats to the Ukrainian national security. Russia has been a bully when it comes to using cyber attacks to influence elections all over the world, and election software, system software has been utilized for this purpose. Given our long diplomatic relationship with the Ukraine, the U.S. should reaffirm its commitment to helping them push back against social media and other Russian cyber attack. Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, for all the work that you do. I'll yield back the remaining part of my time.
Thank you. We go to Dan Donovan of New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support all of the bills that are being marked up today. I'd like to speak on the End Banking for Human Traffickers Act that you've introduced, and it seeks to combat human trafficking by taking aim at traffickers' finances. I support any measure that seeks to put an end to this deplorable practice. I fought for adult and child victims as a prosecutor, and I am still fighting for them today as a member of Congress. Not only am I proud to support H.R. 2219, but I'm also proud to help bring an end to the exploitation of children by introducing today a new bill, the Creeper Act. The CREPA Act seeks to ban the importation of lifelike child sex dolls, which is the newest outlet for pedophiles. Emerging psychology on the topic says these obscene dolls encourage the abuse of real children. They endanger our children by providing near real-life training for the worst among us to target the most vulnerable. I call upon my fellow members to continue to work to protect children from human trafficking and other sex crimes, and I thank Chairman Royce for this important piece of legislation that will help to do just that. And I yield the remainder of my time.
Mr. Joaquin Castro of Texas.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to speak briefly on H.R. 1997 and thank my colleague Brendan Boyle and all those who are supportive of the bill. You know, it's important that in our future we have stronger cybersecurity cooperation, but also I think ultimately a cybersecurity mutual defense pact. So much of our mutual defense is set up around physical intrusions against a nation or physical aggression against a nation. But we've had a very painful lesson in the last few years about the effects of cyber intrusions and the chaos that it can sow within a country. And other nations, such as Ukraine, have also experienced that. So as Brendan mentioned, I think legislation like this is just the beginning to what I see as a full-fledged cybersecurity mutual defense treaty at some point. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. We go to Joe Wilson of South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be a co-sponsor today of House Resolution 3851, the War Crimes Rewards Expansion Act. And today, American families benefit from the leadership and coordination of Chairman Ed Royce and Ranking Member Elliott Engel in marking up this important legislation and the 3 other bills that are pending. The legislation before us in regard to the War Crimes Rewards Expansion Act clarifies statutes that are beneficial to the American people. This Department of State's rewards program helps prevent international terrorism, international narcotics trafficking, serious violations of international humanitarian law, transnational organized crime, and other criminal acts by authorizing the Secretary of State to offer rewards. This bill clarifies that the existing authority to offer rewards leading to the arrest or conviction of foreign nationals for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide can be used in connection with the domestic prosecution of foreign nationals under U.S. law, such as statutes criminalizing war crimes or genocide by adding a reference to, quote, under the United States law. I'm grateful for the leadership also of our colleague, Congresswoman Virginia Foxx of North Carolina, for sponsoring this important legislation with Congressman Elliott Engel, Randy Hultgren, and Congressman Jim McGovern. We also should recognize and appreciate H.R. 2646, the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Extension Act, as being a significant promoting new job opportunities for the people of Jordan. On my visits to Amman, I've always been impressed by the young entrepreneurs who I've had the opportunity to meet. It's so inspiring and has to be so meaningful to the people of the Middle East. Thank you, Ambassador, for being here today. I yield back my time.
Ted Deutsch of Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to you and Ranking Member Engel. I want to echo my support for all the measures before us today. At a time when the American public is rightly concerned about Putin's aggressive posture in Russia, meddling in the U.S. elections, and sowing instability in Europe, we have a natural partner in Ukraine. Ukraine's been on the front lines of Russian aggression. Russia has launched numerous cyber attacks against Ukraine, including knocking out large swaths of its electric grid in massive attacks. And the capabilities that Russia develops against Ukraine could one day be used against us here at home. That's why the Ukraine Cybersecurity Cooperation Act is so important. I want to thank Representatives Boyle and Fitzpatrick for bringing that forward. We have an interest both in defending Ukraine from Russian aggression and in securing our own defenses, and helping Ukraine actually teaches us best practices for hardening our own defenses against potential Russian attacks. In particular, I also want to thank the Chairman and Ranking Member for bringing forward H.R. 2646, the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Extension Act. Chairman Ross Layton and I, along with Representatives Rogers, Lowy, and Schiff, introduced the bill to reauthorize the U.S.-Jordan Defense Cooperation Act of 2015, and the bill comes at a critical time. Jordan is key to stability in the region. They now face a slew of destabilizing forces. As a result of the conflict next door in Syria, Jordan, which was already home to hundreds of thousands of refugees, has now taken in an additional 650,000 Syrian refugees. That's just the official UN number. The true number is much higher. This influx has taken a toll on Jordan's resources at a time when they are helping us in our fight against ISIS. To help ease the burden, U.S. assistance to Jordan is focused on emergency services, education, and growing access to clean water. The bill before us will ensure that Jordan gets both the military and economic assistance it needs to care for refugees and to fight back against ISIS. It also authorizes the establishment of an enterprise fund to spark private investment in Jordan's economy and help create jobs for entrepreneurs and small business owners. And just as the U.S. won't waver in its support for Jordan, we expect Jordan will not waver in its support for refugees, including the 50,000 Syrian refugees currently in dire conditions at their Rayburn refugee camp that my colleague, Representative Cicilline, spoke about earlier. I want to thank my colleagues for their support and commitment to Jordan's stability and strategic partnership as we continue to end the march of ISIS and seek a political resolution to the crisis in Syria. Thanks again to the Chairman and Ranking Member, and I urge my colleagues to support all the measures before us.
Thank you, Mr. Deutsch. Noting we've got less than 10 minutes left in the floor vote, we will now go to Gregory Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Noting that, I'll be very brief. First, I want to say the committee has done it again. Every measure here on this markup, it's a pleasure coming to this markup because we are all together on it. Whether you're talking about the United States-Jordan Defense Cooperation Extension Act, Jordan being one of our biggest allies and taking all of the individuals in that they've taken in and working in that region for us, outstanding. War Crimes Rewards Expansion Act, you know, we've got to go after those bad actors, outstanding. End Banking for Human Traffickers Act of 2017. We've got to stop. This is, you know, the year 2017, and to think that we still have human traffickers and individuals who are trying to finance them, particularly in light of the recently discovered Libyan slave trade, which is another form of human trafficking that must be stopped. This bill would make it more difficult for those profiting from the human trafficking and slave trade of African migrants in Libya to launder those funds. Excellent bill. And finally, of course, I thank you and, of course, Mr. Boyle and Fitzpatrick for their leadership on H.R. 1997, highlighting the need for deeper cooperation on cybersecurity with Ukraine. As the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Europe, I'm acutely aware and supportive of the steady but tumultuous path of democracy that Ukraine is forging. In fact, the best Russian policy today is a good Ukraine policy, one that helps protect the freedoms Ukrainians fought for on Maidan. These freedoms and push towards the idea of Europe is an example for what Russia may become one day. The brave civil society actors and reformers in government face a range of difficulties, and this bill works to address a very important one, cybersecurity. Transatlantic support for Ukraine's security should be comprehensive. This bill hones in on one of the most difficult facts of security and offers guidance on how we can help. Cybersecurity cooperation is not expensive, but it is effective, and I'm extremely pleased we are forging ahead in this area. I yield back.
Thank you, Greg. Do any other members seek recognition? Hearing no further requests, the question occurs on the items considered on block. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it, and the measures considered on block are agreed to. So without objection, the measures considered on block are ordered favorably reported as amendments. Staff is directed to make any technical and conforming changes, and the Chair is authorized to seek House consideration under suspension of the rules. That concludes our business for today, and I want to again thank Ranking Member Engel, thank all our committee members here for their contributions and their assistance with today's markup. The committee stands adjourned.